So good morning, and welcome to Mosaic and our study through the life of Abraham. We've been in Genesis this is week 33 actually. So we've been at this for quite a while. We're getting down to the end of Abraham's life from a time standpoint. He's at 100 years old this week. He dies at 175, but most of the stories happen once you have he's going to sacrifice Isaac. Once from there, there's very little more that's shared about his life. So we're going to cover that fairly quickly. This morning, I'm going to try to work through a fairly good-sized section, really 2 chapters, just because I don't want us to be squeezed up against the end here. I'm going to stop teaching for a short time, and Ray will do some teaching for us here in a few weeks. And I want to make sure we end the life of Abraham we're done with that before I stop. So what we're going to do for this first section here, there's 3 screens, and I'm going to have one of you read that if you would. We'll just see this story in its totality, and then we'll kind of work our way through it. If one of you would do that.
From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it is I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, What did you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought, there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.' Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'Behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you.' To Sarah he said, 'Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated.' Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife."
So let's start with what's the significance of Abimelech taking Sarah? Why does that matter to this story? I mean, yes, it's kind of a failing on Abraham's part type thing. You can look at it from that perspective, but I think there's a bigger thing going on here. So let me show you a couple of things. It says, "When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said to him, 'I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless.'" This is back in chapter 17. He's 99 years old. Later, same chapter, And God said to Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, or Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And then later on down in that same passage, but I will establish my covenant with Isaac, who Sarah shall bear to you about this time next year. So what we're seeing here is there's a 1-year time span from chapter 17 till the birth of Isaac. So we've got a 1-year time span. The clock has started. Okay, that's significant. Verse 18. Jesus, again, we've talked about this. The 3 men come to Abraham, and he has a meal for them. One of them is Jesus, and 2 of them are angels. And Jesus here is speaking when it says Lord in all caps. That's who that is in this particular case. They said to him, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the door behind him. So again, reiterating that. So what that tells us is chapter 17 and 18, this is all a very tight time frame, maybe in the course of a week. So he tells Abraham, you're going to have a son. There's a covenant or a promise given. Then he shows up with him and 2 angels very shortly after that, because it's still a year out before it. So it's not months later is the point. It'd be 11 months from now I'm going to come, right? If it had been a while. So it's pretty quickly. What happens the next day from this is Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed, because these 2 angels leave from this conversation. They go to Sodom and Gomorrah. They rescue Lot, and the next morning destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. This is chapter 19. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew, and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. So this is the next morning he goes out where he and the Lord had been speaking. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that God destroyed all the cities of the valley. So we're still very tight time frame here. This is about again, maybe within a week of the time he originally said, a year from now I'm going to come and give Sarah a son. From there, that's the next section. So we just finished this Sodom and Gomorrah thing. So when we started this morning and it said from there, from where? From standing there looking at Sodom and Gomorrah in smoking ruin. Why would he leave? Well, because there's this smoking pyre neighborhood. I mean, he's getting out of there is what the point is. It's a bad place to stay from all the ash and smoke. And so they just pick everything up and leave and go out of that area. That's why he's leaving. So we know he leaves fairly quickly from that place. Just logically that would happen. And Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur. Now the Negeb, Israel's coming down, and then you have Egypt, which is the top of Africa. And in between that, there's this little area, and they call it the Negev. And then there's these 2 cities. So this is that big map we've often looked at. So let me show you if we zoom in here. They think Sodom and Gomorrah is in the area of the Dead Sea, so down in that bottom area. And we know that this town he ends up at is south of Gaza. And Gaza's in this area, and it's about 10 miles down, so it's going to be in that area there. So that's quite a ways for him to go over there. I mean, not hundreds of miles, but it's 50 miles away or something. He just gets out of the neighborhood, lets all that settle out. So that's what it's describing there. So that kind of is a different view of it. You can kind of see where that is. I kind of zoomed in, I think, a little bit more there for you. Okay. Abraham said to his wife, or said of his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Ger, sent and took Sarah. Now, we're not given a time frame here. We don't know, number one, how long did it take them to pick everything up and travel over. We don't know after they got there how long it is that he takes her. But the point is, you might push that to a month, 6 weeks. The time has started. You've got 1 year from now, she's going to have a son. 9 months from, or 3 months after that conversation, 9 months prior to the birth, she's going to conceive Isaac. The clock is running, and we're at maybe within 4, 5, 6 weeks of her conceiving Isaac. And this happens. Do you see that? I would say that very much is Satan on the move. He's like, oh, I know what I can do. I can create all kinds of confusion. I'll just have this Abimelech guy take her, and now she's not with Abraham, and the promised son can't come. Or if he does, even if it's from Abraham, no one will really know. Who's the dad? Do you see what I mean? But immediately, it doesn't give us a time frame, but God came to Abimelech in a dream. Now, if you go back to the one where he did this before in Egypt, there was plagues sent, and it took him a bit to figure out what is going on here. God's not leaving it up to chance. He just comes immediately in and says, you're a dead man. I mean, he just drops the hammer like right now. Why? Because he's got to get her back to Abraham quickly so that there's a time span. He needs 10 months between she leaves Abimelech to the birth so that there's no confusion later. That, I think, is what's going on here. So that, to me, is one of those big takeaways. He has a plan, he's working his plan, and when people screw that plan up, it does not thwart God's plan. He just resolves those things, and he'll do it either quickly or slowly, depending on the circumstance. And in this case, he just goes straight in, hits the nail on the head, deals with it, and she's back very quickly. And that's what you see being described here.
Chris,
Go ahead.
can I put
Yep.
something in there? So it's interesting, the timing of this is really interesting because for Abimelech's household, for them to recognize that the women of his household could not conceive, that he would have had to have been there
A little bit, yeah.
a little while.
Now,
So, a month?
one thing being, I don't know that they may have known that they couldn't conceive. We're told that he healed, but we're not told that they knew necessarily. So I hear what you're saying, and that could add more time to that.
Yeah.
But we're not.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like on the first one with Egypt, that's how they figured out there's a problem, is these women aren't conceiving. That's not what happens here. Now, we know they couldn't, but we also know God just shows up in a dream and says, you're a dead man. Why? Because you took this man's wife. Wait. So now we're going to see that. Now, Abimelech had not approached her. So he said, Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say, she is my sister? And she said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart, the innocence of my hands, I have done this. I think that's all truthful. I mean, he really is saying, wait a minute, I had no idea, that's what's going on there. And God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you have done this with the integrity of your heart. And it was I who kept you from sinning against me. So he takes this woman, again, which is remarkable. She's in her 90s and she's so beautiful, he immediately scoops her up. Now, granted, there's a difference here. I understand. I mean, they're living longer, but you could say, maybe proportionally, she's in her 50s or whatever. Like, what? You know what I mean? Okay, fine. She's in her 50s and is still one of the most beautiful women around. In Egypt, like the Pharaoh took her immediately, and none of the other guys are like, no, you have her, because they don't want to get killed off so the Pharaoh can have her. They're smart enough to just say, hey, Pharaoh, here's this lady. Abimelech, the king of the area, he immediately swoops in and takes her. But God protects her, also protects Abimelech. He intervenes immediately to take care of that. It was I who kept you from sinning against me. He's done that. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. He's intervening really providentially, meaning he's not allowed those events to happen, but he's also miraculously now intervening. So it's both. He's miraculously intervening by communicating directly with Abimelech in the dream. Okay. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, I know you may be tempted, don't. Do this now that you shall surely, if you don't, then you will surely die. And not only you, but all that are yours. He just kind of turns the volume up a bit on this, and it's like, okay, look, get her back now, and if not, not only you, but all your family is going to get wiped out. So that's pretty remarkable. So then Abimelech, I skipped over a section, but we've read that already, where he calls in his servants and they're very afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done this to me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said to him, what did you see that you did this thing? So it's like, why would you do this? I don't even hardly know you. I mean, you're treating me like an enemy, and what's going on? Why? What made you think this was a good idea, right? Abraham said, I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place. So there's obviously activity happening there that made him think that way, I think. One of the things, I was talking to my son yesterday about this, and he brought up something I hadn't thought of. We talk about people killing the husband to get the wife. David kills Uriah to get Bathsheba. Right? That's just a great example of what we're talking about here. That's what he's afraid of. He's afraid he's going to get Uriah. He doesn't want that to happen here. I've known that that's a common practice, but I thought, well, that's actually a really good example of when it really did happen. Go ahead.
You know, not like that it has anything to do with the story, but it's so interesting that they can have like 500 wives, but as soon as somebody's married, oh no. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that interesting? Or, I mean, they're killing the husband so that it's okay.
Yeah.
I
can murder you, but I can't have your wife. Yeah. Adultery is just, but murder, that's
right. And concubine, sure.
Yeah. That almost like, it's like I've heard this, I'm sure it's an exaggeration, but it's like in the Bible Belt in the South, you can't get divorced, say 30 years ago or whatever. So somebody would like have their spouse taken out by a hitman because they can't get a divorce. It's like, wait, you're going to have them killed? It's like, yeah, so it's that same thing. And what that's about, I think, though, is you're not going to kill the person like in cold blood in the street with everybody looking. You're going to make sure they die secretively. You could still look okay, like David did, and then so it's all about how you look. Yeah, impressions. What you look like to the community. Is that not absolutely the way the world works today? We're no different, right? Yeah. People do horrible things when no one's looking and then try to pretend to be good when everybody's looking. Same concept here. So he thought that there's no fear of God at this place, clearly, so I better tell him she's my sister to save my life. Then this is the verse. I've showed you this before when we looked at it with Egypt. This is how we know she really is his sister. This is the verse that tells us that in verse 12. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother. Yeah, so they have different mothers, but the same father. They're step-sister, step-brother. The prohibition against that would not have been given for a while yet, so this would not have been necessarily uncommon. People will ask, where did Cain or Abel get their wife? Well, it was their sister, like directly sister. Adam and Eve had kids, and they married each other. You had to, because there was nobody else on the planet, right? So that did get stopped later because you start to have a genetic problem, but early on that wasn't a prohibition. And here they've stopped marrying actual sisters or brothers, but they're still marrying step brothers and sisters. I remember Brendan and I were watching one of these murder mystery type shows on BBC, and it was set like World War I time frame, something like that. And they had married a cousin, and that was okay. But then they figured out these two people that were in love, found out they had the same dad because he had an affair. And now all of a sudden they can't be together because you can't do that. But cousins were okay. Well, today we don't do first cousins. That's not good. But even within the last 100 years, that was something that might have been acceptable, which is kind of unusual. So we tend to think the way it is now is the way it's always been. And no, that's been progressing along and changing. Okay. He says this then on to Abimelech, and when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do me. At every place in which we come, say of me, he is my brother. So this is a plan they've had all along. This is the second time they've done that we know of. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants, and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah to him, his wife to him. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you, dwell wherever you please. Which I think is fairly magnanimous of Abimelech. I would think you'd just say, here's your wife, get out, go away, which is exactly what happened in Egypt. They threw them out of Egypt for doing this. Now they sent them off with treasure, but he's saying, hey, stay, live wherever you want, which is interesting. To Sarah, this is a key part of the story, I think. To Sarah, he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you. And behold, before everyone, you are vindicated. You are innocent. I have done nothing with you. So this helps establish he's not the father of the son that will be born down the road. I do think there's a time frame here as well. We don't know what that is, but I do think there's that. But this is very specific. He doesn't have to do this, but God leads him to do that because it needs to be made clear. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female servants so that they bore children. For God had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So that's what you were referencing. I just don't know if they were aware of that or if that was something that hadn't really manifested itself yet. We're not given an explicit, but it may be. And if so, that even draws us closer, into the actual time where he would conceive, or she would conceive Isaac. Next set of verses. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time which God had spoken of. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. So let's just keep reading the rest of this. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded prior. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him, and Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. I don't think that she's like they're laughing at her. They're just laughing with, I cannot believe. Yeah, it's that kind of laughing. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So that's what happens there. So let's talk about the significance things here. This event occurs within a few days or weeks of God's promising the birth of Isaac. I think I helped you see that as a timeline. God intervenes quickly so that Abraham can be the undisputed father of Isaac. That's, I think, a very significant thing. one of the next questions is, why is it important that Abraham is the undisputed father of Isaac? But I found something else I want to look at real quick first. This is kind of a short rabbit trail, but what is one of the consequences? Because there may be more than this, but so I'm not going to say this is the consequence, but it is one of the consequences of Abraham saying, Sarah is my sister. There's a consequence to that. He's done it multiple times. Why is that a big deal? This is somewhere in the 80 years or so later, because my memory, I went through this all yesterday, but rather quickly trying to find this verse. This is after Abraham's death. He dies at 175. He's 100, so we're talking after that. I think it's about 80 years later. It says this. So Isaac settled in Gerar. That's where this happened. He's back there again. He's there because of a famine. And he takes Rebekah, his wife, and his sons, and he goes to this same area. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, she is my sister. Now, she is not his sister. There's no like half his sister thing going on here. For he feared to say, my wife, thinking lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance.
So Isaac's following in his father's footsteps.
Yeah. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, I don't know how old this guy was the first round, but he's there 80 years later. It is the same guy, because they talk about his the chief of his military. It's the same guy, so it's not like some other guy with the same name. Abimelech, king of the Philistines. Back then he wasn't called that, so he is called king of the Philistines now. Looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. There's an interaction between a husband and wife that has nothing to do with sex. That's just a playful, laughing interaction that does not happen between brothers and sisters. That's another thing to pick up on there. But anyway, so he can just tell by looking at these two interact. You guys are married. You're not brother and sister. So here's my takeaway on that. The decisions we make as parents are seen and often copied by our children. We need to live our lives in light of that. When we're doing something, you can always bring some sort of a justification as to why, that maybe that's a good idea, whatever. The fact is our kids see that stuff. And yeah, so that's what's happening there. Isaac is doing what he saw. He didn't even see it. He wasn't around. But the stories get told. You know what I mean? He's heard this. That's what his dad did. He knows the stories. It talks about around campfires and whatever. And so later he shows up and thinks, hey, I'll try that. So he does this thing that his dad had done. Okay. So what's the importance that Abraham be seen as the undisputed father? So this is the passage we were just looking at, that that the Lord came and helped her conceive. Now, back to the thing we looked at before. She shall bear, shall a child be born to a man who's 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And then later, Sarah shall bear a child this time next year. So this is a promise of the Lord. I want us to look now at Romans 9, because this is where this kind of connects in and why it's so significant. This is Romans 9, starting in verse 5. To them belong the patriarchs. Them is Israel, the nation of Israel. So to Israel belongs the patriarchs. And from their race, according to the flesh, meaning from a bloodline standpoint, is the Christ, who is God over all. It's one of the most explicit statements that Jesus is God that I have found. It's like, how did I ever miss that prior to this? That's kind of like, highlight that, underline that somewhere. Next time you run into your Jehovah's Witness friends, show them that one. All right. And then he just talks about blessed forever. Amen. But it is not as though the word of God has failed. So he's saying, don't think that what they happened with them, it wasn't a failed thing. For not all who are descendants from Israel belong to Israel. So what is he saying there? And not all the children of Abraham, and not all are the children of Abraham because they are his offspring. But through Isaac shall your offspring be named. That's a quote from this section we've been looking at. This means that this means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as offspring. So the first thing to notice is that not every child that is a child of Abraham is a child of promise. So obviously we have Esau. We'll learn in the weeks to come, after Sarah's death, he has several other kids. We don't talk about them very much, but he has actually several kids after Isaac with his next wife. And so the point is, none of them are the children of promise. Only Isaac is the children of promise. But not even all that are children of descendants of Isaac are Israel. What is that talking about? That's saying that there's a spiritual element to this promise. And you can be in the bloodline of Israel, but reject God and therefore not receive the promise. And Galatians describes that as those who have faith are offspring of Abraham. And in that way, from a spiritual standpoint, you and I are children of Abraham because we're children of that promise. That doesn't mean we get the land that was promised to the nation of Israel, but we do get the spiritual blessings that are promised to them. For this is what the promise said. About this time next year, I will return and Sarah shall have a son. So what we see here is in Romans, they're referring back to this passage we're looking at, making it clear that God wanted this to be a miraculous birth to make sure that everybody knows this is my doing. And if there's ever any ambiguity about who the father is, that's going to create problems in Romans. So God clears that up back there and makes sure that this is clear of who the father of Isaac is. But then this one's also interesting. Back to Genesis 18. There's the quote. That's where that comes from. We've been looking at it this morning. But then this is the next section. And not only that, not only the fact that he had this miraculous birth with Isaac and Sarah, not only that, but also when Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born and had done nothing either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls, she was told the older shall serve the younger. Completely not the way it would normally be. So to me, you see miraculous things like the birth of Isaac at 100, she's 90 years old. This one isn't miraculous. They have 2 kids. It's not miraculous. But providentially, he orchestrates things so that the youngest one becomes the ruler over the older. That's not normal. So he uses both miracles and providence. Providence is simply things happen in your life and they work out. That's providence. Everybody's heard the stories of, somebody's car flips over the edge of an interstate embankment and rolls and then lands in a river upside down, and surely everybody's dead, and they go and there's this little air pocket and they happen to have enough air and they survive. And it's like, man, it was not your time to go. Apparently you just rolled through an interstate and you should have been killed 6 times over, and here you are. Well, in the other case, somebody's mowing their lawn, the rock hits the thing, bounces off the tree, hits them in the temple, and they're dead. I mean, it's like, wait, you know what I mean? Those are providential. Those aren't miracles specifically. They're providence. And that's kind of what we interact with in most of our life. So, why is this important? All of the promises to Abraham are made to his offspring. So if Isaac isn't his offspring, then he doesn't get the promises. God uses a series of miraculous and providential circumstances to demonstrate his sovereignty over the founding of Israel and the coming of the Messiah. So this is really a big deal, but it's not a big deal unless you kind of put all those pieces together. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Okay. So Abraham called the name of his son. Let's see, we've looked at that one. Okay. And Sarah said, oh, we all saw that one as well. All right. This is the next section. I'm going to have one of you read. I'm tired.
And the child,
No.
and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with her child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba.
So Beersheba is actually, and we'll show you a map of that here in a second, but it is down in that similar area to where they've been. And often you'll see a comment like from Dan to Beersheba. It's like saying from New York to LA. It's the extreme ends, you know what I mean? So Beersheba is all the way at the very southern end of Israel. So, I don't think we should take the verse, whatever she says, do it. That's not like a life verse for somebody. This is specific to this situation. God is having this happen because he wants to separate them off. And therefore, that should happen. The other thing is, I don't know that the Ishmael is laughing at the son, Isaac. He's just laughing. She just sees him laughing. It doesn't say he's laughing at Isaac. I think it's that she's just very unnerved by the fact that he's there and he's, I don't know. There's a great feast. Of course he's laughing, you know what I mean? But so there is this insecurity on Sarah's part here. And she just wants these people away from her son, you know. So some of this, I don't even know that it's good on her part. But God is using, again, providentially, there's nothing miraculous yet. He's saying, they do need to separate from you. Go ahead and send them away. Obviously, Abraham is sad about that because it is his son and he loves his son. This is the next section. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Now, let me pause and say this. This child is 13, 14 years old. He's not a baby, okay? Sometimes this story almost gets told that way, but I'm trying to remember it, but it's in the 13 to 14 years old based on when Ishmael was born and how old Abraham was at Isaac's birth. Okay, then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. And he said, that would be that's an ancient version of a 9-iron shot away, or you know what I mean? We would say something like that. That's in that era, bow shot. Everybody got that. And he said, she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And she went opposite him, lifted up her voice and wept. So for whatever reason, she's still going and he's dying from lack of water. I'm not sure exactly why that would be. It just kind of doesn't make sense to me. You'd think a young, strong young man might weather that as well as she does, but for whatever reason, that's not the case here. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God, I wanted to focus on this real quick first before we get into this. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, the angel of the Lord spoke to her before, but it looks like he actually made an appearance to her. This, it says, the angel of God. So you can miss that if you're doing it with a search engine. because I'm looking for the angel of the Lord. This is the angel of God. Now, is that the same person? Well, if you go on further down, it says, the angel of God said to her, I will make him a great nation. Angels don't make anybody anything. They're messengers, right? So this is God speaking to her. But it's this God that is speaking to her is called the angel of God. So I would say, yes, this is Jesus again speaking this to her. And she's had other conversation with him before. So just with that in mind, now let's look at this whole thing. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift the boy and hold him fast with your hands. I will make him into a great nation. So she's very worried he's going to die. No, get up, get over there, get him, hold him. He's going to be okay. Not only is he going to survive, I'm going to make a nation out of him, a great nation. This is, I don't. This would be a kind of maybe a mix of a providence and miracle. It's a miracle she hasn't seen it. That's the miracle. There is water nearby. There's a well of water. It doesn't say he moves her to it. He opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. So they are sitting there dying of thirst, and there's a well. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like when Jesus would tell the disciples stuff and they didn't understand it. But there are some of those where it says, and the Lord prevented them from understanding. It's kind of a miracle of blindness or a miracle of not understanding. And this one is that. And then he opens her eyes. Because if she had seen the well, she wouldn't have been crying out. There would have been no need for the interaction. So he needs her to get to that place of desperate need of help so that he can then step in and say, yeah, I'm here. I've providentially led you right to the well, but I didn't want you to know that yet. Now you get to know that. And so now she sees the well, went, got the skin, gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt, where she was from originally. Okay, chapter 22. 2 screens. I'll just have one of you read this, and we'll get through this next section here. Back to Abimelech.
At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my descendants, or with my posterity. But as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me, and with the land where you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. When Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? He said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. Therefore that place was called Beersheba, because there both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines.
So if you remember earlier, we saw he was Abimelech, king of Ger, or something to that effect. And then later when Isaac, he's called Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And it's like, well, maybe this is 2 different Abimelechs, right? No, this is Abraham, same time frame. And he's now called Abimelech, king of the Philistines. So it is the same guy. Second thing, this Phicol, or however you had the commander of his army, is also mentioned later when it's with Isaac. So it's the same commander of the army. So 80 years later, these 2 guys are still around, and they're dealing with Isaac. So that's how we know they're the same, those 2 different things there. Beersheba, let's look at that. This is the map I showed you earlier, and there's Beersheba. It's kind of in the middle there. Let's see, I don't know if this thing will, there it is. That's the Beersheba. Okay, hopefully my map does, yep, all right, good. So, and that's the section we were just in. So, what's your main takeaway from the morning? I was hoping we'd have some extra time, and it looks like we do. So, a lot of this is just narrative, it's story. There's not these huge takeaways, but I think there are some things we can pull from this, and you may have different ones than I do. So, what are your thoughts? What's your main takeaway this morning?
Well, this is nothing new. It just affirms to me that these patriarchs were terrible fathers.
Yeah,
I mean, we're only getting a piece. I'm sure they did good things.
sure.
But even you guys, as good fathers as you are, once in a while you make a mistake.
Right.
But that's not what this is. These are big history changing things.
Yeah. Well, and we may make mistakes that are history changing. We're just not around to know about it, right? But, I mean, 3 generations from now, my great-great-great-grandkids are doing something stupid because of something I set in motion, you know. That's why I was saying that earlier. It's like, Abraham's not even around to know that his son pulls that stunt. You know what I mean?
But I do have a question.
Go ahead.
It goes back to a couple
Slides.
ago. Do you think that Abraham and Isaac are the only 2 that have ever done this? Or do you think this is something that is maybe,
This idea of saying she's my sister?
is
Yeah, I
more
think-
common than
yeah.
what you think?
Yeah, I
And
think-
maybe Isaac didn't get it from Abraham. Maybe Isaac just was kind of following.
That's possible, yeah. I do think it probably was somewhat common, yeah.
Because she was.
Well, that and
Because she was. I mean, in that time.
she was
She
this
was
very
your
beautiful
sister.
woman, and that. But yeah, I do think there was probably a common practice if you show up in a land that people don't know you and your wife is very attractive, and the brother with no dad around is in a position of authority over her, and you'd have to negotiate with him to get to her. It's like there's some logic behind that, you know what I mean? So it's lying.
So you
But-
save your own life, but you set her up to be taken.
Well, but I mentioned this the last time we did this. No one can get to her without you saying yes. Now, with one exception, the king, the Pharaoh. It's the only one that you can't say no to. Do you see what I mean? That gets you killed. So the guy down the street says, "Hey, I see your sister. She's pretty hot. Hey, I'm going to give you 12 camels. Get out of here. Have you seen her? She's worth way more than 12 camels." And that shuts that down. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad strategy unless she's so beautiful that the Pharaoh himself or the king himself wants her. Now you can't negotiate and you can't say no. So, yeah. I'm not saying that's a good idea and they should have done it. What I'm saying is you can see the logic in it, and I think we do all kinds of things like that where we do things that aren't good, but we can figure out a way to make it not as bad as... How many of you drive over the speed limit?
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Right. Now let me talk through that just real briefly. I have some debate about that. In here, and in here. So I think there's this risk of being legalistic to a point where it really is still illegal to wear hats on Thursdays because in 1897 they passed that law in Indiana, and therefore I don't wear hats on Wednesday. That's kind of dumb, right? That's not really the way that works. And yet, when we drive and the speed limit is set at 55, it's because they are expecting you to go about 60. But if you get to 67, they're going to pull you over, right? Because there's this built-in kind of a gray area. I'm getting passed by policemen going 60 and 55, and they're not going anywhere. They're just kind of driving along. So what is actually like the enforced law? Is that where we're supposed to not go beyond that? I don't know if that's the answer. I'm not telling you you should drive 60 and a 55. What I'm saying is That to me is a little bit muddy, and I'm not sure. I know I'm not supposed to be going 85 and it's 55. I mean, that's clearly bad. So I don't know. There's the spirit of the law, there's the letter of the law, there's legalism, there's license. There's just this weird thing. So what I'm saying is, we do that the way I just did that, and I can justify and make sense, and I'm getting passed when I'm speeding by everybody. So I'm okay. Well, maybe I'm okay, maybe I'm not okay. That's kind of what he's doing. Well, she is my sister, and I don't want to get killed, and I don't want her to get killed. I mean, if I'm dead, she's in serious trouble, so I have to protect her. So I'm just going to tell everybody I'm the brother, and that way I can still be around to look up for her. You know what I mean? You can justify all kinds of things.
In
That's-
Isaac's time,
Go ahead.
was that, were they also still having married their sisters or stepsisters or whatever?
I don't know. I think so. Yeah. They had not had a prohibition
They
against that
still
guy.
had that same
Yeah.
thing, and
Yeah.
she was.
And she was a relative, but not a sister. So she
Okay.
would have been a cousin or a third cousin or whatever, but because they went back and got her from Abraham's family back in Ur.
When you guys were little, we were driving to Ohio or to his mom and dad's, and he was speeding, and I was concerned about getting
Yeah.
stopped. And so I quietly said to him, your guardian angel gets out when you go.
Yeah.
And he just slowed real down.
There was a time in my life where I literally would drive the speed limit. I mean, I'm 45 in the 45, and I'm 35 in the 35, and I was working at a place, and part of it was the guy that was with me. It was a statement to him about my commitment to trying to do that. I went to pick Mom up in Indy at the airport when she would fly in from Denver, and we're coming back on 465, and they had the speed limit marked at 45 for whatever reason. I don't remember if there was construction, whatever. She got more and more and more frantic that we're gonna die if you don't get up and go, because you're getting blown past at 70 and you're going 45. You're gonna get us killed. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like I don't know what to do in some of those situations. I'm not justifying speeding to you. I'm saying in here, that's something I kind of wrestle with. There's speeding, obviously. You can speed. I mean, you can do that. I just don't know if it's 56 where sin starts or if it's 60, or do you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure on that. So I'm not pleading the case. I'm just using it as an example of justifying behavior. Go ahead.
I thought it was interesting that Amalek gave Abraham oxen and sheep.
Yeah, I thought
And
that was
at the
interesting
end,
too.
with their covenant together,
Yeah.
Abraham gave it back. Or part of it,
Some,
whatever.
yeah, seven ewe lambs as opposed to the oxen and sheep and everything. We don't know what, but then it's separate from that. He gave 1,000 pieces of silver to prove that he had not been with her either. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to throw up mine just so that we can keep talking for another minute or two here. Here's my takeaway, and this, again, nothing new here, right? God is sovereign over everything. The events that you experience in your life have not happened without passing through God's hands. And I think that's the main takeaway from Job. Job has no idea what's happening, and yet God initiated everything that happened to Job. Satan didn't bring Job up. God said, hey, have you considered my servant Job? Well, yeah, but look at how you protect him. That's all right, go ahead, have at him. What? So, nothing is happening to you that is not sovereignly been allowed or ordained or whatever. Joseph sold into slavery. Why? Because God had him sold into slavery. Very intentionally. Does that make God the author of sin? No. But God had that happen. He orchestrated those events. So God is sovereign over everything. He providentially directs your life every day. It's generally not miraculous. It's generally just providentially. Son Alan's coming home from work the other day, buzzing along on old 24, and a semi didn't stop at Bull Rapids, went out and completely creamed some vehicle and took out a trailer of another, and it's like 6 cars involved, and he watches the whole thing right in front of him. Providentially, 30 seconds earlier, didn't make, oh, I forgot to go, and then if he didn't do those things, he's the guy getting sideswiped by the semi. You know what I'm saying? We all know that's how life works. Your life is directed through the providence of God. Always seek to do his will and then trust his leading. We can't control, we can't determine, we don't know, but that doesn't mean, well, then just go live willy-nilly and he'll just, no. You should be seeking to do what he wants you to do. You should seek to live a holy life. Try to live by the principles of the scripture. But at the end of the day, the farmer who's diligent still gets wiped out by the hailstorm, just like the lazy farmer. You know what I'm saying? Providence, that you trust in the providence of God to get you through, even though you are making every effort to live the life that God has asked you to live. Last thoughts before we wrap this up. Go ahead.
As we read the Bible as a whole, Abraham
Yeah.
is kind of God's first foray back into contact with
Yep.
human
Yep.
on earth.
After
kind
the
of thing.
flood, yep.
Yeah, after the flood, and it's interesting to, we read it in scripture, and it,
Yeah.
things are happening like
Just jump
this.
13 years, yeah.
Yeah, but Abraham's not experiencing like that. It's years between these visits from
Yes.
the angel of the Lord.
Yeah.
And a lot of life happens between that.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've noticed, and the thing that I take away from this, is God shows up at the crucial times, at the times when Abraham was just, or Sarah was at the end.
Yeah.
I cannot stand it. I can't do this anymore. I can't.
Yep.
And here comes the angel of the Lord.
Or here
Sometimes
comes
with
it.
his buddies, sometimes alone.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of living,
Yes.
and you get to the end of your rope, and then God shows up.
I don't know if you were here that week when we went from God gives this incredible, bring out the animals, cut them in half. He's a smoking pyre, and he goes through the midst of that. And then we get to the next chapter, and here comes God again. But it's 13 years later, and I used the illustration. It was around May 1st when we did that lesson. May 1st, 13 years ago, they made the announcement that they had killed Osama bin Laden. How much life have you lived since Osama bin Laden's death was announced? That's the time span between God showing up and then God showing up. That's kind of astonishing when you think. Now it's a period, and then the next sentence is 13 years later. To your point, it's like, yeah, we read all of Israel's history that way. Man, these guys are screwing up all the time. Well, probably less than you, probably less than me, because we're seeing the high points or the low points, not the day to day. So to your point, that's good, Phil.
Just tapping into what Misa was saying, how strong their faith was during all that time.
Yes.
For the other Sarah, it's like she laughs, I'm gonna have a child. It's like, yeah, and it happens, right? So
Yeah.
it just gives us hope that hang in there, and be faithful.
Keep going.
in what
Yep.
we do.
Yep. Last thought, I want to pray. Nobody? All right. Before I pray, let me, just to clarify, I wasn't telling Owen you should go speed this afternoon. I'm telling you that's something I'm struggling in here about. We have this thing of pursue holiness. We're absolutely instructed to do that. But I see warnings against legalism, and so I'm trying to figure that out. I'm not telling you, I'm saying I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. So, anyway, that's it. Let me go and pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. It's it's amazing how there's always so many relevant things in passages that are so familiar, or we've heard the stories, but yet when we slow down and we dig in, we can find things of great relevance for us today, and we're grateful for that. Lord, as we continue to move through the life of Abraham, we pray that you would help us to continue to gain insight and truth, understanding. This great picture we will see next time of Abraham offering his son, Isaac. Just what a remarkable story. I pray that you'd have us see what's there, but also see what is the picture you're painting beyond just the obvious of the sacrifice of Isaac. You have used that as a great illustration of your great love for us, and so help us to see that as we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.